we are in for a major treat. I am so excited for our speaker today. So, quick introduction. Thomas Frank is a YouTuber, author, musician, and entrepreneur who has been helping students and professionals be more productive since 2010. Thomas's main YouTube channel has garnered over 2.9 million subscribers, covering topics in self-improvement, ranging from effective studying and learning, productivity, personal finance, and fitness. His second channel, Thomas Frank Explains, is the world's largest Notion education channel with more than 130,000 subscribers. Thomas also holds a Notion certification and is the author of the web's most comprehensive Notion formula reference. And then Thomas is also the co-founder of Nebula, a creator-owned streaming service with over 600,000 active users. He's been featured in Business Insider, Wall Street Journal, US News, and many more, giving talks on succeeding in the creator economy. In this session, Thomas is going to show us the exact Notion system he and his team use to manage their entire content creation process across multiple YouTube channels. If you don't use Notion, you'll learn useful tips and tricks about the content creation process and how to optimize it. Thomas, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for that very kind intro, Nick.
Of course. And we're going to turn you loose in just a little bit, but I just have to ask you a couple questions first. And you have a massive YouTube, couple channels, and you've had a massive impact on students and professionals everywhere. And I noticed recently that you started a second channel, Thomas Frank Explains. And I was just kind of curious, why did you do a second channel? What was your thought process there? And yeah, what happened there?
Yeah. So to answer that question, both for you and everyone else, there's two main reasons for it. The first being that I was kind of burning out on my main channel. And I've sort of talked about this in some podcast interviews, but the main reason I felt like I was burning out is I didn't really have a gigantic goal that I was marching toward anymore with the main channel. It was like, we've hit 1 million subscribers, we've hit 2. I've covered a lot of what I wanted to cover initially on the academic success angle and productivity angle. So now it's just like treadmill, make the next video. And then as I got into Notion, I started getting this idea of like, what if I could create the most comprehensive resource for people who want to learn Notion? So partly a little bit of like, give me something to do that is different than my main channel as like an outlet for my creativity, with less pressure from sponsors and the algorithm and things like that. But the reason primarily that I decided to make Thomas Frank Explains a second channel is I wanted to create a destination for people. So the YouTube algorithm focuses mostly on videos, not so much on channels, which means from an algorithmic perspective, I probably could have put all the videos from TF Explains on the main channel and just sort of treated it like a different series. And maybe, they wouldn't do as well as the productivity videos or vice versa, but the algorithm does a pretty good job at separating those. Most viewers these days are coming in through the homepage or suggested feeds. They're not browsing your channel. But from a branding and marketing perspective, what I really wanted to create was a destination where when people watch one video, check out the channel out of curiosity, they are immediately hit with this like instant feeling that they have landed at the place they're supposed to be. So if you're in my target audience, you're like, I want to learn how to use Notion. I want to help, run my company with it, or I want to use it for note taking and second brain purposes. I want to create content with it. You land on Thomas Frank Explains, you're going to see all those videos. You're going to be like, this is my mecca. This is where I'm supposed to be. And let me go get on the newsletter and maybe buy products and all that kind of stuff. But I want the message to be very clear, which is why those videos don't live on the big channel.
That is such a comprehensive answer. And I mean, you've been doing this for so long, and I'm relatively new to the game. So I'm like, yes, tell me more. And yeah, I've felt, these burnout moments, but you've gone through the ebbs and flows and kind of seen how you've thought about this process with that second channel is really illuminating. And I know many people who are live right now and who watch the recording also aspire to know more about content creation, which is why it's so exciting to have you. Hey, one more before I turn you loose. And it's really about being a co-founder of Nebula, which is a creator-owned streaming service. So alongside all your content creation, somehow you're a co-founder of Nebula, which is an amazing service. And I'm just kind of curious if you could explain how that happened.
Yeah, that was a very organic process. So, for some context, I'm part of a creator agency called Standard. And we started, I think it was like 2017 when things really got kicked off. I think I was the seventh creator they signed. And it really was just your typical YouTube agency where we would go procure sponsors for creators. And for the first 3 years, I was just a client, wasn't a part owner, just was being represented by them. The difference being that Standard, number one, was very data driven. So they would go to sponsors and say, we want to actually get conversion numbers so we can have our sponsorship rates be set fairly instead of based off of voodoo metrics like views, which don't perfectly correlate to dollars. There's no such thing as a like standard CPM for YouTube. The other thing is we really focus on the community aspect. So with previous agencies that would bring me sponsors, it was like, hey, we've got Audible. They want to give you $2,000. And I'm like, cool. Thank you so much for giving me money. And then I never hear from them again. With Standard, it was like, you're going to be represented by us. We have a Slack. There's a ton of creators. We're all helping each other out, giving feedback, swapping tips. So we built this really tight-knit community. And one of the persistent issues that kept happening with a lot of creators in our community is they would make videos that were clearly a fair use, but copyright holders would have used the YouTube copyright system to take their videos down. Great example would be my friend, the Legal Eagle. Devin Stone does like laws broken in the Dark Knight, or how legally accurate is my cousin Vinny. I think he says that's actually the most legally accurate movie in existence, weirdly enough. So, he's dealing with all these bogus copyright claims when he is doing fair use commentary on these pieces of media. And a lot of creators don't know how to defend against that. So one thing we came up with was, well, what if we create a platform that's almost like a DLC pack to YouTube, not a competitor, but this is a place where creators can do riskier projects. They can do things that might get copyright struck on YouTube, even if they are fair use, but we can also do things that just might not work on YouTube in general. So a good example now, my friend Joseph has this series called Modern Conflicts, which covers conflicts that go along, that are going on in the world all over the place. These are topics that will almost certainly get demonetized on YouTube. So the amount of work he puts into these, the amount of graphical work and editing work and research work means he financially could not make this series on YouTube. There'd be no return on investment. But by putting it on Nebula and then advertising Nebula, it becomes like this amazing virtuous cycle where he gets to basically be sponsored by his own content, which converts better. And we've just sort of been building that up for a lot of our creators, and the network effects have been amazing.
I just love it. So sometimes things just, you can tell it's working and it's how it should be. And that's how I feel when I see that sort of 1-2 punch with, YouTube can kind of be the front end of some things, but then it can lead into the richest, highest signal to noise place in the world, which is probably Nebula for the type of content that you get there.
I think so. Cool. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, without further ado, thanks for a little bit of those background questions. And now I'd just like to kind of lean back and soak up what you have to share about the content creation process.
What I'm going to do in this session is essentially walk you through my content creation process, which I have turned into a nice little flow chart right here. And I think I've provided this link to the people running this webinar, so they'll give it to you at the end, but there is going to be a little page I've created. I think this is it. Yep. So you'll have access to this flow chart as well as to a few other resources that I'll go through in this talk. But my purpose here is I want to actually walk you through the process that both myself and a lot of other professional content creators I know actually go through to create well-formatted content that is likely to do well on platforms that they've chosen. You'll notice that there are some arrows that skip certain steps. Sometimes you have conviction about a topic and you don't have to do something like validation, but this is the general rough idea. And the reason I want to focus on the actual process is Nick has informed me a lot of you don't use Notion. A lot of you use Obsidian, or maybe you use Roam Research. So the first thing that I want to put out before we get into the nitty-gritty details is the app that you use matters much less than the process that you create. So the process I'm going to show you and demonstrate for you in this session is going to be using Notion because that's my tool of choice. I also happen to earn my living by teaching people Notion at this point, so I have a bias for Notion. But really, it's the process that you go through and how you can mold your tools to best fit that process. So without further ado, let's talk about the process of crafting professional level content for the internet. So basically, the way I see it is you have ideation. Basically, you get ideas from a bunch of different sources, and I'll go into those sources in a second. Then you have validation, which is the step that most amateur content creators skip, I think. And validation means, is this worth my time? Is this worth my investment? And is the final product going to resonate with the audience I'm trying to connect with? And in business terms, is it going to get views? Is it going to support my business? From there, once you have validated a topic and basically greenlit it, you go through a research process, a scripting process. If you are like a YouTuber or a filmmaker or something like that, you probably have a lot more heavy scripting than if you are a podcaster or a blogger. Then you have filming and recording. If you are an audio visual creator like I am, you've got your editing process, you have your publishing, and then you can go into maintenance, analysis, and repurposing. So super high level overview, but this is sort of the entire process, and we'll kind of get into what this actually looks like and what you can do to optimize each step. So here in Whimsical, by the way, this tool is called whimsical.com if anybody is curious. Every time I use it in video, people are always curious as to what it is, and it's a pretty sweet mind mapping tool. So I've just kind of created these little mind maps on each of these steps, or at least on the ones that are most interesting. So for ideation, one question is, how do I get ideas for content, and how do I make sure they're good? First, you have to capture ideas, and ideally, you'll have several different ways or sources from which you can capture good ideas for your content. It could be experiences. I think this might actually be the most useful one. Experiences from your own life, or things that you can teach people from your area of expertise. I'm guessing most people in this particular webinar are more cerebral types. You're deeply studying a lot of different subjects. So your own personal experiences and expertise you gain in that pursuit is likely going to lend itself to content ideas. You also have sources like books. You have online content. Maybe you have events just like this that you're going to. Maybe you're watching me. In 5 minutes, I'm going to show you my voice capture workflow that automatically transcribes my thoughts. And one of you is probably going to go, oh my gosh, I could do that, but for Obsidian. That's an event-driven idea right there. And then you're going to have audience ideas and feedback. So I spend a lot of time on Twitter. I often get questions on Twitter that turn into video ideas. Literally yesterday, I spent 4 hours programming on an idea that Alex Lieberman from Morning Brew just tweeted about. So that's basically audience idea right there. And then for online content, we have things like tweets, articles, videos. You've got community discussions from places like Reddit and Hacker News. The key part of this step, though, is making sure that you have an efficient way of capturing these ideas so they're not just being held in your head. I don't know if you're anything like me, you probably are, but I get way more ideas than I can actually execute on. And if I were to just try to remember those ideas, I would not be able to hold them all in my brain. So that is what I have Notion for. And that is going to kick us over to actually showing you a couple of pieces of my Notion template here. So I'm going to jump back and forth between the demo version of the system that we've built and my actual version. There are parts of our actual production workspace that I can't show you just because I don't want people stealing my ideas, or maybe there's confidential stuff. But there's certain selected parts that I can show you, and I think it will be more compelling than just showing the demo. But this is basically the system that we've built. It's a Notion template called Creator's Companion. I do sell it, but really it's just a productized version of what we've been building for ourselves over the past 5 years now. Oh my goodness, I've been using Notion for 5 years. What this basically does is it gives us a dashboard with links to all of our different channels, so we can easily manage all of our content creation efforts across multiple different verticals. We have all of our YouTube channels there, blogs there, social media. If we're doing like longer tweet threads, we'll plan content there as well. And then we have basically the process I just showed you pretty much turned into a step-by-step series of pages. So we have an idea capture area. This is where you can easily capture ideas. You can break your ideas out by channel. And then we have a validation step that'll go into a project management step. And inside of each project's template, there are places for research and title, thumbnail, brainstorming, scripting, all that kind of good stuff. So if I wanted to capture an idea, ideally, what I would do is just go straight to my content ideas page, and I would dump that idea right here. And this is where I'm actually going to show you a piece of my actual Notion workspace here. So I have another template that's called Ultimate Brain. It's basically just like the personal productivity template, uses Tiago Forte's para method mixed with GTD and a bunch of other cool stuff that I thought was useful. And one page on there is called Quick Capture. So I've got this on my phone's home screen. It's one of those Notion little widgets. I can just hit it and go right into it. And I've got a task inbox, a note inbox, but I've also basically embedded my exact content ideas thing here. So the moment I get a content idea, if I want to take the time to write it down and put a pin in that, because usually I don't these days, I've got a better way. But if I want to take the time to actually write out some ideas, I will do that in an idea here. And my team has access to this as well. So it looks like, I believe my head writer Ransom, created this idea here. And this is now just in our ideas area. And he's got this whole little brain dump on things that should be scheduled versus things that shouldn't be scheduled. He's like, we could look into research around this. Is there advice on it? Could we craft a good video around this? And in the idea capture stage, I think it's not all that important to do validation on, is there going to be a really killer title around this? Is this a topic that people really care about? This is like the butterfly net stage. You're basically just waving it in the air, trying to capture anything that looks cool. And then you can go through and do the whole, is this worthy of pinning to my little board of insects later on? Right now, it's just, let me capture stuff and see if anything cool will happen there. So I did put a pin like 30 seconds ago in the whole like writing it out thing I said, because recently I created an even better workflow where I can just talk to my phone and use OpenAI's Whisper model for transcription and then ChatGPT for summarization. And I can get a full summary of an idea I have. So the majority of good ideas that I get usually happen when I'm between sets in the gym or when I'm out for a walk, sometimes when I'm driving. So for many, many years, I have always wanted a workflow where I could just talk to my phone and then get everything I said transcribed perfectly. And for a very long time, that was near impossible because most speech to text models were not very accurate. Like Siri transcription is very bad, if any of you have tried that out before. But with Whisper, also with DeepGram's later models, basically transcription is now a solved problem. So this is literally like just a machine-made transcription of me talking. I think I was talking for like half an hour for this one here. And I have the full cost of this transcription, 9 cents for 14 minutes of me talking. But I also get a summary, and then I've set up things in my automation to give me like a list of stories and examples and citations I might have used, any potential main points, action items, that kind of thing. And if you want to learn how to do that, on Thomas Frank Explains, we just made a video all about it, went kind of viral. And it's something that you can set up for free, and then you're just paying OpenAI's API costs, which are extremely cheap. So that is essentially how I capture information these days. And I can actually show you an in-progress project that we have that actually leveraged this workflow here. So we're working out a video for the main channel on imposter syndrome. This is going to be one of the first videos that we publish as we're kind of relaunching the main channel, since I took a long break to build these templates and to focus on TF Explains. And so we had this idea a long time ago, like, how about we just do 7 ways to cure imposter syndrome? We were thinking through, like, how do we combine a good title and thumbnail here that makes people want to click this? And we kind of got to this point, maybe kind of like a sticking point, you call it, in the process, where we figured the term imposter syndrome isn't that interesting. There's not a lot on YouTube that's already done super well that isn't like TED or there's like a School of Life or something like that. So I wonder if there's a better idea for this. And so yesterday, literally just at work, I had this idea of like, okay, well, what if we had a bit more of a controversial angle of the video and we called it how to have unearned confidence? You often like see these people on Twitter who are just very confidently acting like experts in things that they really don't know what they're talking about. And there's an element of that kind of personality that I think a lot of us more cerebral types wish we could embody to a degree, like not to a disingenuous degree, but to the point where our imposter syndrome doesn't paralyze us. So I literally just talked this idea out to my phone, and then I got a full summary, a full transcription, additional info, all that kind of stuff. And we can just dump the link straight into our research document for this video. So anytime I have an idea, the pipeline from I have the idea to it's recorded in Notion is now much shorter and much wider because I can just talk instead of having to sit down and write, which I think is very powerful in specific contexts. I do still think that writing and deeply thinking about what you're working with is important at certain times. But if you have a way to brain dump and get that formatted, that's very nice as well. Okay, so we're now going to move on to validation. And I'm going to collapse this mind map here. This is a cool little trick there. You can just collapse all your elements in Whimsical. So validation is maybe the biggest thing that I fleshed out here. And I think that if I teach you validation, it probably is going to be more useful than anything else I talk about in this talk. So it's pretty good that it's happening early. So validation is basically, now I have my idea. How do I craft that idea and package it so that an audience is actually going to want to, number one, click on it, but then number two, stay there and watch the entire video. And ideally, be so interested in my work that they click another video in the suggested tab, because that's how YouTube channels blow up. And really that comes down to, how do I make my idea connect to what I call a burning question? Now, if you're scrolling YouTube and you see a thumbnail, if that thumbnail doesn't put a question in your head that you need to get answered, then it's not a burning question, and it's probably not going to cause you to click. A good example, the one that I always pull from memory, is the idea of the word phlogiston. So back in the 1800s, there were some scientists that posited the idea that fire is made of this imaginary substance called phlogiston. That's the explanation for what fire is. If I ask a person on the street, do you know what phlogiston is? They're probably going to say no. They're probably not going to be like, what is it? I need to know, because it's just me basically making up a word. It is a real word, but from their perspective, having never heard the word, it's a made up word. It doesn't connect to anything they really care about. So they're not going to be that curious about it. But if I say, here's the top 10 filming mistakes from Avengers Endgame. Well, everyone's seen Avengers Endgame, and people love to point out cool mistakes and things. So there's a burning question for a lot of people. Oh, what are the top 10 filming mistakes in Avengers Endgame? I have to click that one right there. So that's kind of what I mean by validation and packaging. So I kind of have a few different, I always almost forget to switch back over, so I'm glad I caught myself this time. I've got a few different nodes here in packaging. We have title, we have thumbnail. We also have the hook. So when you start the video, how are you hooking the viewer and convincing them to not just hit the back button or go away? And what's the angle of the video itself? And to give you an example of that, I'm actually just going to use this recent video as the example. So this video is called, I can zoom in even more to make it more obvious, how I use AI to take perfect notes without typing. And the thumbnail, I think, is a great complement to that. There's a bit of a curiosity factor in there because we have no typing. We've got this phone here with maybe a mystery app to some people. Maybe some people do know that it is just the stock voice memos app. But either way, a lot of people are like, whoa, I want to take notes. And how would you do it without typing? I got to know. Which is why this video is, I think, the second fastest growing video on the channel in our entire history. Only being topped by the Notion AI video, which has the additional benefit of really hopping on a powerful hype train, because this video came out the same week that Notion AI came out, and a lot of people were very curious about it. And then, of course, we have the AI hype train itself. So this was not the original packaging for the video. And I'm just going to check the chat, just making sure. Cool. The original packaging for the video was this one right here. This just Notion plus ChatGPT, AI voice notes. I can't remember what the title was, but it wasn't as powerful of packaging because, and I only realized this by talking with other content creator friends of mine and basically just getting my ideas torn to shreds. This video assumes that the audience knows what Notion is and knows what ChatGPT is and cares about AI voice notes. And so when I was making the video, that was actually my assumption. And I was like, yeah, I'm making this video for Notion users who want to leverage AI. And my friends were like, think about the audience of people who know what Notion and ChatGPT are. And now think about the potential audience of people who want to take notes with their voice are, or who want to take perfect notes without typing, because that's sort of an even broader, more mysterious, but cool idea. And they rightfully pointed out that way more people want to be in that latter camp. They want to take notes with their voice. And then it obviously made sense when it was pointed out to me, right? Anybody who uses Obsidian would like to do this. Anybody who uses freaking Evernote at this point would like to do this. Who wouldn't want to be able to talk to their phone and get a transcript of what they said and a summary and all that kind of stuff? Tons of executives want to do it. I now have people in my DMs who are like, hey, can we do this for Zoom meetings? Can we transcribe them and split their speakers out? There's all kinds of stuff there. So by going through a whole bunch of thumbnail and title iterations, we eventually landed at something that appeals to a much wider audience, which has the additional benefit of bringing tons of new people into the channel who then can go watch my other videos, get into Notion, maybe get onto my newsletter, buy my products. And we found, I can't pull the thread right now, it'll take me too long, but this video added, I think, at current point right now, $25,000 in additional sales over baseline, which is not very typical for a single video. So by focusing on expanding the audience here, by putting a little bit of extra effort into packaging, we got an outsized result, which is great because the research process for this video took something like 6 months. So to get a better ROI just by tweaking the packaging, put an extra hour or two of effort in there, my 6 months of effort was much more handily rewarded. Another good example, because this is, again, probably the most important thing that I can teach. This is an older one, but on my main channel, I have, here it is, my 5th most popular video of all time. It's called The Most Powerful Way to Remember What You Study. So this video is about spaced repetition. Again, given this audience, I'm guessing a lot of you know what spaced repetition is, but for those of you who don't, the Cliff's Notes are as follows. If you try to remember something as close to the point that you would actually forget it as possible, it is akin to essentially maxing out on the bench, and you get a greater recall effect for it. So basically, like if I space out my studying, if I am trying to learn a language and I quiz myself on a word today, and then I wait a week, if I can remember it a week later, I'm going to remember it much more strongly just from that single recall event than if I'm studying it every single day with linearly spaced periods. So that's how spacing works. It is probably the most powerful technique in learning because it can be comboed with many other different techniques. But my original title for this video is just going to be how to use spaced repetition to study more effectively or something like that. And I got to thinking as I was brainstorming titles, again, does everybody even know what spaced repetition is? And if somebody doesn't know what that is, and I present the term to them in the YouTube homepage, are they actually going to be curious enough to click? I don't think so. So let's get to the crux of what this is doing for people. And I often think about this concept of core human desires. When people say they want something, maybe they want that thing, but in more cases, what they want is what the thing is going to give them in terms of a core human desire. And that could be less stress, more security, feeling more fulfilled in their work. It could be sex. It could be anything that is a true core human desire. So here, people want to remember things that they're supposed to learn, and they want to put in less effort, which connects to, I don't want to work that hard at things that are boring. And I want to achieve my goals without less effort, with putting in less effort. So by packaging it this way, the most powerful way to remember what you study, and then showing the Lightner method, which is this interesting index card method of doing it, this creates a very powerful question. How does this weird pile of cards and sticky notes connect to the most powerful way to remember what you study? I gotta know. And 3.6 million people had to know, so they clicked and they watched the video. So that, my friends, is packaging. You also have audience fit. So is this idea actually going to connect to the audience that I am trying to build? I think this is an important point to raise for a lot of us because I know that I am a super curiosity-driven person, and sometimes I'll go down rabbit holes that I think are personally interesting, and then I'll make content on them, not realizing that most of my audience doesn't care about that. I remember making a video on how to remember long numbers years ago, and nobody watched that video because who wants to remember long numbers? And then there's the channel purpose here. So what is the purpose of the content that you're creating? And how does that purpose benefit your channel and the business you're trying to build and the changes you're trying to create in the world? So it could be, I'm trying to attract a new audience to grow my channel's audience and to bring new people into what I'm actually trying to teach. I would argue that that is what the recent video did on Thomas Frank Explains. This video brought in a new audience, a lot of people who have never used Notion before, and then they can go watch my other content and potentially get into Notion. Or it might be, I'm just trying to build more of an authoritative personal brand around this topic, which actually I think connects to this library option as well. I have a specific library of content that I'm trying to build, and this video is one book in that library. Thomas Frank explains the whole point of that channel is to be a comprehensive resource for people who want to learn Notion. So that means there needs to be a video on databases. There needs to be a video on creating links between pages. There needs to be a video on formulas, which I haven't done yet, but I will very soon because it needs to be in the library. Am I trying to deepen the connection with my audience? Maybe I do a more personal video because I'm trying to, connect with my audience on a personal level. Or am I trying to monetize? Do I have a product that I'm trying to sell or a service? Okay, well, if I'm trying to do that, what is a specific content angle that's going to connect very well toward my monetization engine and get people into it? My video on basically walking through my second brain template is exactly that. It is a pure monetization play, but it has been sort of packaged in a way that just shows people everything. So that way they don't have to buy it to get the value. But it really is meant to bring people to the template sales page and ideally get them to buy. So these are a lot of the things that you can think about in the validation step of your content creation process. And within Creators Companion, we actually sort of turn this into a specific page. And there's actually kind of two areas to do it. So this is the validation view for all content. And this just kind of gives you a way to go through ideas and tag them with, is there search interest behind this idea? Is it a trending topic right now? Am I making a video about AI? Well, I can go on Google Trends and I can see that AI is super trendy right now. Am I making a video on Rome research? I can go on Google Trends and see that Rome research is not quite as trendy as it used to be. That might involve, or it might inform my decisions on what I'm going to make because I have limited time and energy and resources and basically infinite ideas. Do I just have a gut prediction that maybe there's not a lot of SEO search volume behind this keyword. Maybe there's not a lot of trend behind it, but I just think it's going to be a banger. In that point, in that case, trust your intuition and maybe you make the video anyway. Maybe you think it's going to perform really well. I would say in that case, pay extra attention to the performance of the content after you publish it so you can start to ideally narrow the gap between your predictive ability and the actual outcome of your content. But as you go through this, you basically just start to weed through the ideas that you think are not that great and the ones that you think are really worth your time. And that's going to obviously make the value of your time invested in content better and ideally grow your channels and your presence online. After that, and I guess before I go to the after that part, I will show you one other thing here. And that's going to be the topic validation area. And I think this is an older project, so I'll show it to you. Where's my demo thing? Here it is. I'm going to go back actually. I want to go to my channel so I can show you that part. Because the regular validation, the sort of overarching validation step is not the only thing you want to do. So one thing that we build into our project template and hence into our process is this topic validation page. And this is where we can add title ideas, thumbnail ideas, angle ideas here. And you can see for a lot of videos, we go through a ton of different title ideas because it's not until, sometimes your 7th or 8th title idea, maybe sometimes even your 50th title idea that you hit upon something that's really good. There's this metaphor that I like to think about when it comes to basically dredging good information and good ideas out of your brain. And I call it the mines. So if you're somebody who's mining for gold or precious metals, you probably have to move a lot of dirt and useless stuff to even get yourself to the point that you have close proximity to where the gold might be. And knowledge work is very similar. This is one of the reasons why I love my voice notes workflow so much, because I will get an idea and I'll start recording it. And the first 5 minutes might be okay, but by virtue of talking to my phone for 5 minutes, I start to get even better ideas. I start to get deeper into the minds and just more creative, interesting ideas start to bubble to the surface that literally can't get there when you're just not doing anything, not doing any sort of recording of your ideas. You're not going to get your best ideas if you're just, sitting there trying to work. They usually just come up organically through the actual act of making ideas. So if you're making content, don't stick with your first title. Challenge yourself to write 10 titles, write 20 titles. I use this tool called CoSchedule Headline Analyzer, which gives a score to your titles. And I don't take the scores at face value, but I do use them as sort of like a challenge. Like, okay, can I write one that will get me over 75? And just by virtue of that exercise, you land on good titles. Another thing that I will point out to you, I didn't plan to cover this, but there is a tool that we actually built in standard called thumbsup.tv. And if you drop a thumbnail into this, which I should probably switch back to the screen. If you drop a thumbnail into this box here, it's actually going to show you what the thumbnail will look like at every size on youtube.com. So homepage size, sidebar size, all that kind of stuff. And then you can actually type a title in there too, and it'll show you if that title is going to get cut off or truncated at any of the areas there. So that's a big part of my packaging process as well. Okay, so once validation is done, we go into research, we go into scripting. And for these, I can just kind of show you what I do. I think I've eaten up a lot of my time just talking about validation. And I think that's more important than talking about how I research. But if I go into, say, the research and notes area for this video, basically inside of every one of our projects, we have a template. And we have a research and notes page, we have a script page, and then sometimes we add additional pages as well. My editor added this thumbnail references page yesterday to this particular project, but every video gets a research and notes page. And this is basically where I or my team will brain dump sources, will brain dump ideas for the video. Basically, this is a very unstructured place to just dump everything. For bigger projects, we may actually bring in several notes. And one thing that we don't have in this current edition of our production workspace right now, but I have productized it, is we basically mash together Creator's Companion and Ultimate Brain in a way where you can literally basically bring, let's see here, there it is. You can basically bring your notes that you already have into a content project. So say you've been taking notes on investing for years, and now you're making a beginner's investing video. You might want to bring all those notes you've already taken into your actual project area for the video you're making, and that integration can actually do it. So we go through scripting process. I can show you a little bit of that as well. I think, let's see here. This video did it. So with my videos, especially on my main channel, we sometimes will do multiple different sections. So one thing that I will often do with my scripts is I'll use these colored blocks right here to highlight this section is voiceover. Green sections are on camera, they're main set sections. Purple things are going to be like little asides or skits. So if you've seen the 5-hour rule video, which was one of the most successful videos on my channel, this is literally the script for it. And as we're filming, I just have the script up on my phone or on an iPad. And this basically informs like what we're going to go do. It's like, okay, cool. Let's go do all the on-camera green sections and just get all that filmed right now. Awesome. Now I'm going to go just do all the voiceover sections. And then if there's anything in purple, these are going to be skits that we go ahead and do. And one thing that I'll point out, in case anybody's watching this and thinking like, oh, I have to be super meticulous about my scripting process, is the first section of this video is fully written out. But then once I get into the actual tips for implementing the 5-hour rule, I just use bullet lists. So this entirely comes down to personal preference and what you feel works best for you. But I feel, and I've learned this through 10 years of making videos at this point, that for the majority of a video's runtime, a bullet list is perfectly fine for me. The only time I want to fully script anything is, number one, if I'm talking about something highly technical that I'm not personally an expert in, basically doing like a journalistic report of something, I might fully script out a sentence just to make sure I don't get something wrong. Or if I'm crafting, in this video's case, a story-based intro to the video. So that is why we made sure to literally write the first half of the video out, because it was more documentary style. We kind of had like a specific story we wanted to tell. And then when we got into the actual tips, it was like, cool, I can easily tell people how to implement these things. We don't need to go through extra time in the scripting process to literally write everything out. So going back, we have filming, recording, editing. If people have questions, I'm going to try to leave 15 minutes for question and answer here. So I'll wrap up pretty quickly. But if you have questions about editing, I can talk about that. We have our publishing process. One thing within our template that really helps with the publishing process is we have an editing checklist or a publishing checklist. So this is basically all generated from a template here. And one of the things in the template is this publishing checklist where sometimes my editor won't always check them off, but it at least gives us essentially a standard operating procedure document that we can check off if we want to for all the little things. And this is important because as a content creator going through a lot of complex processes, it's easy to forget things sometimes. Like maybe you forgot to order captions for your video, or maybe you forgot to add your end cards. By having a checklist inside of each project, you're basically guaranteed to never forget it unless you fail to check the checklist. And then we have our little publishing or our post-publishing ideas or activities here. And I've kind of created some mind map nodes for these, I suppose. So maintenance, sometimes content is going to need updates. One great example for blog post updates on College Info Geek, we have a post that basically shows the FAFSA requirements that get updated every single year. And that's for like federal application for student aid. So every year we have to go into that blog post and make sure that it's up to date. Otherwise, it's pretty much misinformation. Remaking timely videos. Sometimes you're going to have a video that does really, really well, and then it goes out of date. And so you want to remake it. In my case, Notion Fundamentals is a course that I've been building for a long time. It's all on Thomas Frank Explains. It's all free, but some of the videos in that course are now kind of obsolete. There's one video on making multi-column layouts in Notion that has all these tricks and workarounds, and Notion's fixed everything that required those tricks and workarounds in the first place. So I basically need to remake that video now. Changing thumbnails. So sometimes you'll have a video do well and then it dies off, and changing the thumbnail can sometimes revitalize a video that was otherwise dead. So that's a few of the things involved in maintenance. There's also analysis, and I have quite a few options or nodes here for analysis. You have on platform and off platform. These are things you want to pay attention to. So on platform, using YouTube as an example, you could look at your click-through rate, CTR, your average view duration, any spikes or drops. YouTube gives you all of this information. So if you notice that there's a specific drop in the middle of a video, maybe don't do that kind of thing in the future because you're killing retention. For example, maybe don't have mid-roll ads in the middle of your video that you voice yourself. Maybe put those at the end of the video so you keep retention throughout the rest of the video. And did it drive sub growth? And then off platform, did this video drive sales? Did it drive newsletter signups? Did it drive organic engagement? And the key here is to look at all of these different metrics, both on platform and off platform, from the lens of what you intended the video to do. And I want to highlight that because I recently saw somebody who was like complaining about they were writing these guides on their blog that were just basically roundups of tons of tools. And they were like, I don't get it. These tool roundup guides get a lot of views on our blog, but less than half the people who sign up for our newsletter on our other content are signing up from these ones. Like the newsletter sign up rate is much lower on this. And what can I do to improve that? And I'm like, there's maybe some things you could do, but ask yourself, what's the job to be done of that piece of content? You're rounding up a ton of different tools. You're likely, going to send a bunch of people off site just by nature of what that content is. Whereas if you're doing a in-depth educational post on something, and maybe you have a free email course that goes more in depth on that topic, that automatically lends itself to the job of driving newsletter signups more powerfully than a curated list of apps is ever going to do. So think about the intention of your content and then look at your metrics and do your analysis with that intention in mind. And then we also have repurposing. So once you've made one piece of content, you might be able to get a lot more juice out of that berry. If I do a long form video, maybe I can turn that into shorts or TikToks. Maybe I can make follow-up pieces. So I think I have a tab here that shows what I mean there. I have done, let's see how many videos I've done on sleep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different videos on sleep. The Why You're Always Tired video would be number 7. And a lot of these are like, okay, well, I made a video about how to go to bed on time. There's a bunch of additional follow-up questions that come out of literally making that video. Like, how do I get better sleep? How do I wake up on time? How do I wake up without feeling tired? How could I have a good nighttime routine that doesn't take a whole lot of time? All these lend themselves to videos. So one video that gets 765,000 views turns into a group of videos that collectively get over 3 million. And then we have, tweet threads, LinkedIn posts, all kinds of good stuff like that. And here's why repurposing can be so powerful. So just for an example, and then we'll get into Q&A. I have been collecting a lot of these threads that I've been writing on Twitter. So this one here, this is literally, if you look at the sleep thing here, how to wake up early without feeling tired. This tweet thread is just repurposing from that video. It gets 342 likes. It gets a bunch of bookmarks. And by doing this consistently, I've been building my Twitter following up, which has a couple of different benefits. So for first and foremost, a lot of people think that if you link to content that is off of Twitter, the algorithm is going to suppress you. I have found that doesn't seem to be true if the content's really good. So this tweet is literally just linking to a video. and 493 likes, which is very good for me. 903 clicks to the video, also quite good. But more importantly, by building up a Twitter presence, I have found that that tends to make connections, which then make things happen, often more than YouTube does, even though the numbers are much smaller in most cases. So, for example, I made this thread basically breaking down us hitting $1 million revenue milestone for selling our Notion templates. And that tweet turned into coverage on Business Insider. And that was something that I don't think would have happened if it was just like we kept plugging away on YouTube videos. Twitter just has like this beautiful combination of you can educate, you can entertain, you can make good content, but it's just so easy to connect with other people in ways that I think are much harder to do on other platforms. So that is pretty much the process there. If you are curious to see more how the actual template works, I don't want to be too salesy in this. I want to mostly do questions here, but we do have a video on the Creators Companion sales page right there. You can click that, and I basically go through the entirety of the template. So check that out if you are curious. And we do have a link. I think the administrators of this conference are going to be sharing it. I've just thrown together a very, very quick resource page to everything I talked about in this video. So the content creation process, whimsical diagram is there. I've got Notion fundamentals there. If you want to talk to your phone and get notes and summaries, the whole tutorial is there. So check that out. And I think we are going to move into Q&A from there.
Hey, wonderful. I'm just going to jump in real fast. Round of applause, virtual and otherwise, wherever you are off camera. Just give Thomas some thanks. Wow, that was extremely amazing. There was a comment, I think it was from Jessica, that I feel like a child watching an Olympian. That was really great.
My cardio
so
is
many
not that
takeaways.
good,
You're great. Yeah. One of those strength-based events, perhaps.
There we go. Yeah, I'll do better at those ones.
Okay, so there are plenty of questions in the live chat. So Thomas, I'm not sure if you have access to those, if you'd like me to read them off.
I think you'll have to read them because I don't know. Oh, Q&A. Aha. How about you read them anyway, though? Because that'll be more moderator kind of thing. Anyway.
Right. And then you can save your voice after talking nonstop a little bit.
A little bit. We'll see.
Yeah. Hey, okay. So this is from P Pace. Do you think this format would work for streamers? So that part of that gaming community, would it work for gaming channels?
So I guess the thing I'll put up front is I'm not really a streamer. But let me go stream of consciousness right now. That was not an intended pun. Thinking about a streamer that I actually follow. So I am a huge Magic the Gathering player. And one of the channels I follow on YouTube is called MTG Goldfish. And a lot of their content creators also stream on Twitch. So one thing that I know that those guys do is they're constantly getting ideas for decks that they might want to brew on stream. So if I were a Magic the Gathering streamer and I was streaming that game, I would be using something like Creators Companion whenever I got an idea for a deck to at least write that deck idea down. And if I don't want to brew it on stream, if I want to figure out how to put it together, I'm probably going to go into the notes research area and figure out like, how am I going to put this deck together, take some notes on it, maybe record how it performs in games. And that way I can bring it to the stream, be on my A game, make sure I'm performing well. And I have a lot of those questions answered in advance. If I'm doing a stream like they often do, where like literally I'm just going to be on stream for 4 hours, we're going to brew the deck together, we're going to try it out. I'm at least probably going to capture that idea for the deck in my content creation system and probably going to capture a lot of other ideas as well. So I definitely think it can work for gamers and streamers. The one caveat I would say there is don't try to replicate my process exactly. What I have built works best for the kind of content that I create, which is educational explainers. So really take little bits and pieces from what you learn here and see if it fits into your workflow, and whatever does, keep that, pitch the rest.
Yeah, wonderful with that. And here's a question that I think you'll have a pretty good answer to. This is from Brian. Have you ever felt that your Notion team workspace to be too heavy due to years of accumulated data? Many people here practice PCAM in Obsidian. They like it because of the fast speeds. However, Notion sometimes can be famous for maybe being a little sluggish at times. What are your thoughts on that?
So this seems to be something that affects some people more than others. I find that our workspace is quite fast usually, even though it's massive. I mean, we have so much stuff. We've been using Notion for 5 years, and I don't typically find myself frustrated at how slow it is, even though I will readily admit that something native on the desktop like Obsidian is just much faster by the nature of what it is. Other people, though, recently I've seen actually complaining that Notion's been slow. I'm not so sure if it has as much to do with the size of your workspace, and more to do with maybe Notion pushed an update that made databases a bit slower. I know recently they've been saying they've been working on database optimizations. So there may be more behind the scenes to blame than what's in your specific workspace. From a practical point of view, I can let you know that, at least in my experience, the thing that will hose a workspace is super, super, super long, complex formulas. And for that reason, we actually had to split our recurring tasks formula into 5 different formulas. It was literally just for performance, because we basically broke Notion the first time we implemented a single huge formula.
And you are a master of formulas. That that's really interesting, and just something to note with the pros and cons between these two applications is that Obsidian is really difficult to work collaboratively at this current time, and who knows where that will be a year from now. Whereas with Notion, even if it is a little bit slower with some clicks, there's a lot of time saved in how it's collaborative focused. I mean, I don't know
Yes.
if we can say it's focused, but it feel like it works. It just works
Oh,
that way.
it definitely is. I mean, I've talked to Notion co-founders, and they're just like, that is the point. So yeah, one thing I see online is a lot of people comparing Notion and Obsidian, which I think is perfectly valid to do, but it's worth noting that they both started from very different points. With Obsidian being kind of tailored for personal and private and local first productivity, and Notion being tailored for work collaboration. And then they're both so block based, and they're so customizable that you can kind of do a lot of crossover, but you have to realize they're starting from extremely different points.
Exactly. And that's worth keeping in mind. So if it's personal knowledge management, that's one thing. But once you add 1 or 2 people, it's collaborative, and that's a
Yep.
whole nother can of worms. Here, I think we can end with one. This might stump you. This will be our last one, and then we'll wrap it up. This is
Okay.
from, are you ready for this one? This is from Craig. And
Okay.
what is the latest point in the process that you've ever decided to abandon a video or content idea? And what led to that decision to say
Oh,
we're not going?
this hurts me. This honestly hurts me. There's like, I've scrapped multiple videos that I put tons and tons of effort into. I think the worst one is I literally, like, my editor and I flew to Canada, crossed the border, went through customs. We did a whole day filming at the Linus Tech Tips facility, and then came back with terabytes of footage, and we never ended up doing the video. And the reason wasn't like, oh, the video is bad. I think some of the footage we got was kind of bad, and I wasn't proud of it. But the other thing is, like, at that time, we were on a basically like weekly sponsor schedule. And so it just got to this thing where it's like every single week, we're like, do we have time to work on the Linus video? No, we have to make something easier to meet our sponsor deadline. And that continued for years until we were just like, okay, well, they've changed so much about their process that the video is now basically worthless. So yeah, our biggest thing is like biting off more than we can chew, and then realizing like we can't do that on the deadline. And there's definitely other videos we've scrapped, but those are the ones that come to mind.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Oh, wow. All that travel and everything. And sometimes it's just there's too much footage. And you're like, how are we ever going to dust off all of this and
Yeah,
do something with it?
2019, another one. I wanted to learn how to make music, like proper music. So I traveled to New York. We booked a recording studio. I worked with a producer, and we made like an entire metal track, which it is online. It's under Thomas Frank Music. But I took 4 years to publish the song because I was convinced that I needed to make a documentary around it. And we had 5 terabytes of footage, and there was just never time to make the documentary. So we eventually scrapped the doc. We didn't make a music video, and I was just like, okay, I need to get the song out there. But yeah, we have 5 terabytes of really good stuff that I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day because it's just too unorganized.
And it's funny, the more time that goes, there comes a time where it's less likely to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of, yeah, it degrades in likelihood over time. So that
Yep.
striking while the iron's hot seems to be something that you'd recommend.
Definitely, because you're probably never going to summon the same energy you had for the project as when you started the project. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. One thing that a piece of advice I give myself on this is, you can't always chase who you were trying to be a few years ago. If I were chasing who I was trying to be when I was 15, I'd be out skateboarding and probably breaking bones. So I'm glad I'm not chasing that anymore, because there are cool things now that can take up my attention.
Yeah. Well, on that, we're going to wrap this one up. And everyone, let's give a physical and virtual round of applause to Thomas. This has been amazing. A little outro. We've been continuously sharing the links. I've seen Dan share those links in the live chat. Check those out. Make sure you bookmark it into a tab at the very least, like I am, so I can look into it a little bit later. And thanks for sharing your whimsical content creation process right there. That
Absolutely.
was a nice little surprise, and all those resources. So with that in mind, Thomas, we're going to release you from this, and thanks so much for the live session and everyone watching this recording. We also will have a link in YouTube where people can continue the conversation, and that's been posted now as well. So thank you,
Awesome.
Thomas, so much.
Thank you for having me.